Imagine a world where all of Earth's landmass is still a single colossal supercontinent, Pangea. No sprawling oceans dividing continents, no vast cultural divides formed by seas. In this alternate reality, Pangea never broke apart. How would this have shaped the course of human history, evolution, and life on Earth? Today, we're exploring the intriguing possibility of a world where Pangea remained intact, and how that might have changed everything we know about life on Earth. Let's first understand what Pangea was. About 335 million years ago, nearly all the land on Earth existed as a single supercontinent surrounded by a vast ocean called Panthalassa. For millions of years, this landmass hosted a diverse array of life forms, but around 175 million years ago, Pangea began to break apart due to tectonic forces forming the continents we recognize today. If that separation had never occurred, Earth's geography would look drastically different. Imagine an enormous landmass surrounded by one vast ocean with vastly different coastlines and environments. The absence of continental drift would have profound effects on climate, evolution, and the history of human civilization. First, let's talk about climate. The fragmentation of Pangea into different continents helped create diverse climates due to changes in ocean currents and air circulation patterns. If Pangea had never split, Earth's climate would likely be more extreme and uniform in certain areas. The massive interior of Pangea would be far from the moderating influence of the ocean, resulting in harsh, arid conditions similar to a vast desert. Meanwhile, the coastal regions would experience more temperate and wet climates. The lack of oceanic barriers would also mean fewer differences in regional weather patterns, with a large portion of the supercontinent potentially resembling a giant savanna or steppe. Without the separation into different continents, we wouldn't have distinct ocean currents like the Gulf Stream that help regulate climate. The distribution of heat across the globe would be different, potentially leading to a larger polar ice cap and more extreme temperature fluctuations between seasons. The impact on life would be significant. The breakup of Pangea created isolated ecosystems that allowed species to evolve independently, leading to the diversity of life we see today. If Pangea had never split, many species would have been able to migrate across vast areas without natural barriers like mountains, deserts, or oceans separating them. This would likely mean fewer species overall, as the opportunity for isolated evolution would be much more limited. We wouldn't see the distinct regional species we know today, like kangaroos in Australia, elephants in Africa, or llamas in South America. Instead, there might be fewer dominant species spread out across the entire supercontinent. With fewer environmental niches available, evolution might favor larger, more adaptable generalist species over smaller, specialized ones. In some cases, megafauna, giant versions of animals, could dominate the landscape, much like the massive herbivores and predators of prehistoric times. Meanwhile, marine life would also be affected, with a single vast ocean limiting the diversity of marine ecosystems. Now let's turn our attention to human evolution. If Pangea had never broken apart, human migration patterns would have been entirely different. Without oceans to cross, early humans and their ancestors would have had much wider access to the entire landmass. Hominins, our early ancestors, originated in Africa, but their migration to other parts of Pangea could have happened much earlier and more widely. The lack of natural barriers would have allowed for easier dispersion of human populations, leading to less genetic and cultural diversity. Cultures would not develop in relative isolation, so the distinct cultural identities that emerged as people adapted to various environments would be far less pronounced. In this world, there might have been less technological innovation driven by necessity. The division between Europe and Asia, for instance, created natural trade routes and cultural exchanges that spurred innovation. With a single landmass, this exchange might not have been as dynamic or even necessary, resulting in slower technological progress and fewer distinct cultural traditions. The political landscape would also be drastically different. The concept of nations as we know them is deeply tied to geography. The borders of many countries are defined by natural features such as mountains, rivers, and coastlines. Without these natural divisions, political boundaries would be more arbitrary and likely drawn based on conflicts over resources, population densities, or sheer power struggles. Empires could have risen to dominate vast areas of Pangea, potentially leading to the existence of mega-states that spanned enormous regions, as opposed to the smaller, more numerous countries we see today. These large empires might have faced constant challenges to maintain control due to the vast distances and diverse populations within their territories. Another important factor is the spread of disease. Epidemics that once ravaged isolated populations would have had a different impact in a unified landmass. Diseases could spread far more rapidly across populations due to the lack of natural barriers, potentially leading to pandemics that could devastate entire civilizations. Tectonic activity would also play a key role in this scenario. Even if Pangea didn't split apart as it did in our history, the tectonic forces beneath it would still be active. The supercontinent would likely experience massive earthquakes and volcanic eruptions due to the buildup of pressure within Earth's crust. Without the ability to release tectonic stress through gradual continental drift, these events could be much more catastrophic. Imagine a supervolcano eruption or a mega-earthquake devastating a landmass that contains nearly all of Earth's population. The consequences could be civilization ending, setting back human development for generations. If humanity did manage to develop civilization on a unified Pangea, the distribution of resources would play a significant role in shaping modern society. Certain regions would hold vast reserves of essential resources like water, minerals, and fertile land, which could lead to resource-rich regions dominating poorer areas. With easier access to most parts of the world, large trade networks could emerge much earlier in history. This could mean that technological advances spread rapidly across the continent, possibly leading to an earlier onset of the industrial age. However, the lack of isolated technological development could also mean fewer unique discoveries and inventions, potentially stunting some forms of progress. Lastly, let's consider the ecological and environmental consequences of a unified Pangea. Deforestation, overfishing, and other human activities that impact the environment could have a much more pronounced effect on the world. With no isolated ecosystems, the overexploitation of resources in one area could lead to ecological collapse on a much larger scale. Species extinction rates would likely be higher as the lack of diverse habitats and isolated refuges would limit the ability of species to adapt to changes in their environment. The interconnected nature of ecosystems would mean that a disruption in one part of the supercontinent could have far-reaching effects across the entire landmass. The breakup of Pangea was a slow and monumental process that shaped the world as we know it, driving the diversity of life, the evolution of cultures, and the geography of nations. If Pangea had never split, our world would be a vastly different place, one where human history, natural evolution, and the environment itself took a divergent path. While we can only speculate about what might have been, imagining a world where Pangea never separated gives us a unique perspective on the forces that shaped our reality. It's a reminder of how dynamic and ever-changing our planet is, and how the smallest of geological shifts can have the greatest of impacts on the course of life. What do you think life on Earth would look like if Pangea had never broken apart? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more fascinating explorations of what if.